the greatest!
Arguably one of the most recognizable arm wrestlers of the last 2 decades, the infamous Travis Bagent is not known for his serenity on the table, but rather for his seemingly unwavering confidence and unwillingness to compromise or self-censor. Of course, with such levels of boldness, this once illustrious arm wrestler is known to attract praise as well as his fair share of controversy. But in reality, who is Travis Bagent, and through which highs and lows did he become the figure he is now? With his presence imminent at the next edition of East vs. West, it seems like a suitable time to gently guide the bright spotlight of arm history in his direction. I am the Arm Historian, and today we'll take a look together at the rise and fall of Travis Bagent. Well, let me quickly preface the bulk of this video by saying I have a large amount of respect for all the pullers I feature on the rise and fall. Just because someone had a stumble or fall in their career doesn't mean they can't get back up. The trials and tribulations that led these pullers to where they are now are part of what makes them interesting, and what makes them human, and ultimately what makes these videos worth making. Travis Bagent was welcomed to the world on the 10th of March, 1976 in Charlestown, West Virginia, a small city located not far from Washington, D.C., with a rich history. The city was originally founded and subsequently named by the brother of George Washington, Charles, and is now known to have a sparse suburban feel. Travis can genuinely lay claim to being raised from a young age in and around arm wrestling. His stepfather, Jerry Boyd, also known as Big Arm, first found out about competitive arm wrestling during his time in the Navy in the 1960s, and quickly rose to local renown as a ferocious arm wrestler back in Charlestown. Travis first became enamored with sports by playing baseball. He quickly found out he had some athletic talents, as he excelled quite well at the sport as an early teen. Later during Travis's teenage years, in 1990, Jerry Boyd went on to open a bar in Charlestown. He made it into somewhat of a haven for local arm wrestlers. Matches would be going on nearly every day in the bar between patrons, and eventually proper regulation tables were even brought in. It wasn't until Travis was 15 that he first started arm wrestling. He could oftentimes be found arm wrestling in between bussing tables and serving drinks, as by this time he was working during weekends at his dad's bar. Some bigger names in the arm wrestling world would even frequent his bar, one of them being Ray Patton, brother of the legendary arm wrestler Dave Patton, whose record in the 80s was arguably only second to John Brezink. Ray, who was an accomplished arm wrestler in his own right, together with several other notables from the local arm wrestling scene, must have had a big influence on the young developing Travis Bagent. Jerry Boyd eventually even set up a second bar in town named Billy Jack's, which would also become known as somewhat of a hotspot for arm wrestling. Travis would later go on to say the following about this period in his life. Few people have a situation like mine, a place where there are 10 tables and 400 to 600 competitors every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And I cared desperately about finding someone in there that I could beat. I didn't stop until I did. And one thing I had the ability to do was beat people who were stronger than me. I don't think most people get that. Travis's father was mostly known for his quick and strong hits, something that he would stress is critically important to winning. This mentality seems to have rubbed off on Travis, as he developed a quick, strong hit with loads of posting and side pressure as arguably one of his best moves. Bagent first decided to compete in an official tournament in 1997 in Pennsylvania at the age of 21, in which by his account he lost to everyone. I think it's worth mentioning though that there are some conflicting reports on this. Another source tells the story differently, where Travis participated in his first national tournament at the age of 19. Whatever the case may be, it soon became very clear that Travis had an incredible knack for the sport and could quite easily become a serious contender on the national and even world stage. During the following years, Travis would get heavily involved in CrossFit. This fledgling fitness regimen was conceived at the start of the millennium and involves constantly varied functional movements performed at a high intensity. These features obviously played into Travis's natural strong suits, which allowed him to build a career as a trainer as well as enhance his own strengths. In parallel, his trajectory on the arm wrestling table was facing a steep incline too. Travis went on to win several national and world titles, and consistently came out as the top of the pack in other high-profile tournaments. While mostly respectful and loudly confident during this time, some first signs of Travis's no-holds-barred attitude and generally taunting demeanor were starting to develop and being exposed to the public. Around 2004, Travis was focusing most of his efforts in the gym, lifting weights, doing CrossFit and training his grip strength, with table practice playing second fiddle. In interviews at the time, he would recommend newcomers to the sport to get strong first, then learn to arm wrestle. He continued, "You can only trick people for so long. To reach the top, you need power." With this mindset, Travis seemed to rise to new heights within the arm wrestling world, and was soon considered one of the best to do it, especially if you put any stock in his opinion about himself. His prominence reached the ears of Sevan Matosian, a filmmaker of Armenian descent, who was looking to make a documentary about arm wrestling. Specifically, he wanted to hone in and show the narrative of two young up-and-comers in the sport, who were trying to dethrone the then dominant John Brzezinski. This documentary, later dubbed Pulling John, would go on to feature Alexei Voveda, a 23-year-old Russian, and Travis Bagent, who was around 28 years old at the time. I won't spoil too much of this film because it is definitely worth your time to watch it, but I do think it shows some invaluable insights into the mentality of Travis at that time and his life growing up. When visiting his childhood home and family members in the documentary, Travis opens up about growing up without a lot of money and how he couldn't even afford to take regular showers as a child. He arrives at his family's residence with his usual bravado and exuberance, only to be quickly taken a peg or two down by everyone in attendance. At first glance, these comments from his family members might come off as derogatory towards Travis, perhaps fueled by jealousy, generally putting Travis and his accomplishments in the arm wrestling world down. This might have even been magnified slightly by the presence of a camera crew and some smart edits on the documentary's part. However, it becomes apparent quickly that there is at least some genuine love and support for Travis in his ancestral home, as one of his family members embraces him and asks him to come over more often and bring his wife sometime. In the climax of Pulling John, Travis finds himself competing at a World Championship tournament in Ottawa, Canada. Although his usual antics, confidence and loud voice were on full display that day, there were a few more nuanced, quiet telling moments too. One of them being Travis taking some advice from a very young Engin Terzi, the man now responsible for organizing one of the biggest leagues in arm wrestling. At another point, a very young and thin-looking Neil Pickup, famous announcer and father of Arm Wars, speaks on Travis's rising star and power. During the filming of Pulling John, Travis was even invited to feature on the David Letterman show in an exhibition match. By the following years, Travis became known as one of, if not the best left-handed puller in the world, and a serious elite contender on the right. He dominated a lot of large North American tournaments, and did very well on the international circuit. This success made sure he came back under the watchful eye of the organizer of a fledgling arm wrestling league. Neil Pickup saw in Travis an entertaining and very skilled puller and wanted him for Arm Wars. Featuring so prominently on Arm Wars in the next years meant Travis was exposed to a larger number of people from a bigger region in the world. While obviously very competent on the table, his brazen character was on full display. Oftentimes this made for entertaining and highly contested matches. Travis was clearly naturally charismatic and played well on screen. In some cases though, his complete unwillingness to give an inch to his opponent made for some one-sided and generally non-matches that would more often than not end in fouls. Perhaps no match features this better than when the unstoppable force that is Travis Bagent met the immovable object that is Devin Lorette on the table. When these two competitors would grip up at Arm Wars, one was sure to be in for a show. A rivalry had been brewing between the two rising heavyweight stars of the sport, and neither of them would ever back down. After enduring his success in Arm Wars, Travis would participate relatively often in international tournaments, making it to the top ranks at the Zloty Tour and Nemerov Cup, amongst others. By doing this, he solidified himself as a true world-level contender even more and dispelled rumors that the North American field was generally a lot softer. Travis's international escapades weren't all positive though, perhaps because of his in-your-face personality combined with a difference in cultural perception led to some broken relationships with the Eastern arm wrestling world. While we can only speculate on the true nature of these issues, it seems Travis would find himself snubbed by one of the biggest tournament organizers of the region. In 2014, Travis played a pivotal role in seeing the arm wrestling reality show Game of Arms becoming realized. He served in an advisory function and starred heavily in the now defunct show. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, let me refer you to my previous video, which covers the topic of Game of Arms. After the show ended, Travis kept a close connection and bond with one of the producers. Steve Kaplan, who went on to create the World Arm Wrestling League, saw in Travis an invaluable asset to help him out behind the scenes and pull in the event as a big draw to the show. Travis went on to do very well for himself at Wall, becoming multiple heavyweight champion on the left as well as on the right, beating many notables along the way. Invariably, Travis was still a skilled and powerful arm wrestler who has proven on many occasions to be capable of pulling the best. However, his no-nonsense and win-at-every-cost attitude has led the arm wrestler to his fair share of controversy. A prime example of this came at the Wall final event of 2017, where Travis was facing off against the infamous Michael Todd. In the middle of a round, Travis can be seen leaning forward, his elbow coming off the pads and pushing forward, seemingly in an attempt to re-grip, but putting Todd in a clear break arm position. Surprisingly, the backlash from the public was mostly directed at Michael for his angry outburst after the fact. Even Devin Leratt, present in the crowd, seems incredulous after what just happened and the ensuing ref's call. Another arm wrestler and YouTube influencer recently got into hot water for performing a very similar, although perhaps slightly more extreme move. Maybe by facing a controversial figure in Michael Todd, Travis was able to more easily play his misstep off as Todd simply exaggerating. As a pretty ironic side note, Travis would years later referee a match where something similar happened. Around this time, Travis seemingly ended his long-lasting ties with Wall overnight. According to a reliable source, the main issue arose over contract disputes. Allegedly, Travis was under a strict 7 years exclusive contract with Wall. Maybe he was sensing the inevitable downfall of the league and wanted to get out before its collapse. Or maybe he was seeing the booming popularity of arm wrestling and wanted to be able to cash in on the rising hype. Either way, the contract got in the way of his goals. In the ensuing years, most was quiet on the Travis front, especially when it came to arm wrestling and actual table time. Videos on Travis actually pulling anyone of note around this time are few and far between. In reality, Travis was devoting a large amount of his time to his family life, especially in seeing his son develop into a great athlete in his own right. He did occasionally appear in some legacy matches and in a reffing capacity though. Around the time COVID hit, it seems Travis was spurred on to try his hand at social media and dove headfirst again into the arm wrestling scene. He went on to feature in many interviews with online arm wrestling personalities, coming off as generally knowledgeable, quick-witted, but anything but humble. One seemingly major misstep was when Travis Bagent teamed up with Michael Todd to produce a video and live stream in a bid to promote their YouTube channel. Each of them had announced they would face each other in a battle. By saying this, they of course heavily implied that a super match between the two heavyweights would ensue. When the big day came, however, Travis and Michael can be seen posturing on the table a while, and eventually admitting that the would-be match was a farce. Instead, Travis explained that the battle they alluded to was only a friendly competition to see who could score the highest on a local arcade boxing machine. Many fans, some of whom undoubtedly set time aside in their schedule to watch the match, and in some cases even sent super chats to support their athlete, were understandably disappointed. The issue never really got addressed by Travis, and remnants of it can now only be found in the videos of arm wrestling YouTube channels that had covered the lead-up and aftermath of this debacle at the time. He later teamed up with the dawn of arm wrestling on YouTube, Paul Italia, and several other contacts he had built up over the course of his career to create several arm wrestling events. These events were generally received positively and provided some exciting entertainment. In interviews during this time, Travis reiterates how at the end of the day, his main motivation is the potential financial gain. While one can hardly blame anyone for wanting to make a living, by this time one could consider it a defining theme behind Travis's motivations in the sport. While still exuding the same self-confidence as ever, Travis decided to try his hand at professional arm wrestling one more time. Perhaps fueled by the prospect of a rapidly growing sport and all the possible financial benefits that came with it, he organized what in his eyes would be a good refresher match between himself and the young up-and-comer Brandon Alcesser. When the match took place, it soon became apparent that the power and hand control Travis had cultivated over all these years in the sport was still there, initially, but faded rather quickly. He lost a super match to Alcesser in a dramatic fashion after seemingly gassing out after the initial rounds. This result was not that surprising, as Travis hadn't prepped much for the match and was until that time by all accounts not arm wrestling at a professional level anymore. In more recent years, Travis teamed up with Floridian arm wrestler Artem Taranenko in producing a podcast. While episode releases of the podcast are now sporadic at best, the show garnered a modest interest and put Travis on the map in the YouTube world as an active participant even more. In another recent twist, Engin revealed he wants Travis to participate in the upcoming East vs West 6 event. I highly doubt Travis will be showing up to pull anyone other than an exhibition match at best. It would be very exciting to see him show up as an announcer or even referee. In the end, I consider Travis the Beast Bagent to be a cornerstone of the modern arm wrestling era, albeit one with rough edges. Clearly someone who doesn't mind playing the heel, and who isn't afraid to use what some would consider dirty tactics in order to reach victory. He came from humble beginnings and paved a path for himself, perhaps to a fault without compromise. Although I occasionally appreciate, but don't always agree with his tactics, motives, and sometimes downright crude demeanor, I genuinely hope we will see Travis utilize his current momentum and solidify himself once again as an unmistakable part of contemporary arm wrestling culture. Thank you for joining me this episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you'd like to see more, and let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on Travis Bagent. Arm Historian, out.